Mita, thank you so much for joining us today on the Rise and Beyond podcast.
Thank you for having me, Sybil. I'm so excited for our conversation and see where it goes.
Yeah, and I'm excited to talk with you today because we're talking about something that I feel isn't talked about enough. But domestic violence, coercive control does not discriminate. And so it can happen to anyone within any age range, education range, and culture.
Absolutely.
But, even though it doesn't discriminate, there are some nuances based on these things. And so I'd love to hear as much as you're comfortable sharing about your story, because I think people will really resonate with it. And then we can just break some things down.
Yeah. When you're in an abusive relationship, you actually don't know you're in a relationship, like an abusive relationship. It's very hard to determine that because there's so much fluctuation in the emotion and there's so many ways to oversee because you're looking at the good side of someone, or they acted mean, but then the next day they're acting so sweet with you, or because they feel guilty of treating you bad the day before. So they cover that up to act a little bit nicer. So you start overseeing that, right? So I was in a relationship for quite a bit of time and I didn't know it was narcissistic. I didn't even know what narcissism was. And because I got married so young, I didn't develop those things. I was looking at the world in a rainbow glass, rose colored glass. And so when I left that relationship and I got into another relationship that was narcissistic and I felt abused and I felt like, oh, this does not feel like love. Because there was so much gaslighting, there was so much manipulation, there was so many emotional manipulation. I didn't know any of that because I didn't have the knowledge from my marriage.
Yeah.
And so how I became knowledgeable in narcissism and in abuse was, I kid you not, TikTok.
TikTok. Yeah. Social media. Yep.
So that little voice that says, do it, do it, do it. And something was telling me I should download TikTok. And I've never heard of TikTok in my life. And all of a sudden I had this video of narcissism that came up. And then something clicked in my mind. I'm like, oh my God, I'm getting goosebumps just saying it right now. It kept on telling me that these are the things that you should look for when you're in a narcissistic relationship.
Yeah.
And it aligned. And the naive me, I started to tell him that how you're treating me, it feels a lot like what I've just heard in a video. And of course he's going to deny. Of course he's going to try to gaslight me and you're overthinking things, or now you're believing like the stupid videos over me. And oh my gosh, it was unreal. And then
it did not go well.
No. And it kept on going. Like I kept on, obviously that algorithm was on narcissism for me. So I just got more and more and more information. And I'm like, you know what? I need to look into this. So I read a book. So after I started putting boundaries with him and started going quiet is when I actually saw, how abusive it was.
Yeah.
And then when I look back into my marriage and him, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's two exactly same person, but two different bodies.
Yeah.
Like I'm like trying not to get emotional, but the amount of realization I had to have of how bad it was of them and how similar it was in both of them was unreal.
Yeah.
And I saw the patterns. And knowing narcissist behavior, you know that narcissism has similar patterns. And there's different types of narcissism. And one thing that I've heard about narcissism is we all have narcissism in us.
Mm-hmm.
We all can be narcissist. However, our empathy, our integrity, there's other factors that differentiate from a true narcissist.
Yeah.
when we think we're better than everyone, or when we think, oh, I'm all that and they're nothing. We don't see the other person as a human being is when I think is a narcissistic behavior, right?
Yeah.
So I can talk about this for a long time.
Right. And that realization, like when you finally, like when someone first hears the term gaslighting, or they first hear the term narcissistic abuse or coercive control, or when they first hear that language and they connect it to it's like a punch to the gut.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think of myself as a very strong person. And I'm like, it was disbelief of how I was being treated, and I had to understand I was being treated. There was so many realization on my part.
Yeah.
And the fact that I had to know that, first of all, I was like, holy cow. I can't be, I'm not the one who wants to be controlled. This is not me. I'm not being abused.
You're not the right victim.
Yeah. And I'm like, no, that's not me. I'm such a strong person. I have such a strong personality. How can I be that? But then you start realizing that it's true. And then you go into a depressive episode. And it's just the realization when you start accepting that there's so much withdrawal. There's so much, oh, how could it be me? I started getting anxiety around people because I didn't want to be in that position again. Oh, I'm just getting emotional. But so I started pushing everybody away from me because I didn't want to be treated like that anymore. I didn't want to be in that position again.
Yeah. Well, and there's that huge piece is like we have this, like the myths out there that we see in the media, we see in the movies, we see in all these places that a victim of domestic violence looks like this, like a specific look. And there's some geographical differences too to that. And then a perpetrator of domestic violence looks like this.
Yeah.
Right. So there's these false beliefs that you would see it just by how a person looks, their level of education, their race, ethnicity, where they grew up, family of origin, right? All of these pieces. It's like, no, they came from a good family. They can't be a victim or a perpetrator. They came from a good family. They went to college. And what we know is that it doesn't matter. Those things don't matter. And so I'm interested to know, do you feel like there were elements from your family of origin that now you can see like, well, that kind of set me up to potentially overlook some of these things? I know being really young, getting in a really serious relationship and getting married really young, that's one of them, right? That prevented you from having more life experience. But yeah, again, as much as you're comfortable, what did that look like, that family of origin piece? As much as you're comfortable with, because there's probably a lot there, and there's a lot there for so many people.
Yeah, there is a lot to unload. Well, here's the thing. It's not, I think in a culture, we are taught to be pleasing to other people. Right? Especially in our culture, in my culture, we always think about what the other person is going to say, the neighbors are going to say, how we look as a family. It's somewhat of a narcissistic behavior, right?
Yeah. And for people who are listening, not watching, because there's both on YouTube and audio, what culture do you identify with?
Sure. So the East Indian culture, I think a lot of East Indian people would resonate with, like the younger generation can resonate with us because they've been in position where they had to do certain things in order to look good in front of other people, right? Like the guests. Oh, the guests are coming. Oh, you have to look proper. It was like, I want the world to know that you're a perfect child.
Yeah.
Right? You can't be messy. And I think when I started to understand that, and I think I was always the messy one and I didn't care about that. I was a rebel and I wouldn't do anything to please anyone. I would just watch and observe people. Because of my rebelliousness, I think I got labeled very easily to be, oh, you're not a good child because you're not making me look good. right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And yesterday, actually, I was just having a realization of how culturally kids have to behave in a certain way, act in a certain way, and can be messy. It's all about a show, but inside, nobody really talks freely. Now that I can talk freely, I don't want to talk freely with everyone about the things that's annoying me, or I just try to deal with it myself. And I am very aware that it's a trauma response, but that's just how it is. And I started to become a lone wolf, and I rather do things on my own, heal myself on my own, and do things on my own because I don't want anyone to know my business.
Yeah.
They can't, and I am a like you start understanding the awareness that I had to have of myself, why these are happening the way it is, because I had to realize that because I didn't have anyone to rely on when I actually needed someone.
Yeah.
Or when I was going through the darkest times, because I'm the strong person, and they see me as like, I'm doing on my own. It's all a trauma response. Even if I'm going through the darkest, deepest thing, I don't know how to go to anyone.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. What you are saying, I know is going to resonate with so many of the women that listen to this show because they typically have been, right, somewhat of the people pleaser in the sense that they've got their stuff together. That's how they're viewed. They've got their stuff together. They're the ones that everyone comes to help them fix the things, do the things. And it is really, really hard then for a couple reasons. One, because you have that identity of being the person's got your stuff together, but also the level of trust that it is broken when you've been in an abusive relationship, that this is your, air quotes, if you're not watching, your soulmate, the person that should have taken the most care of you, the person you should trust the most, is the one that caused the most harm and the damage. And so learning to trust after an abusive relationship, and learning to trust when you probably, and I actually don't know, so you can correct me if I'm misspeaking, but when you go to someone, family, friends, a professional, and are saying, oh my gosh, I think I'm being abused, or this is what's happening, and the response is you're too much, or you're making a big deal about it, or wow, he's never seen, like, I can't imagine that. He seems so nice. When you have those responses from people that you want to have your back, okay, trust goes out the door.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. It's so true. If anything happens to anyone, I'm always like, how can I fix this? How can I be there for you? I'm that person. But yeah, and when I was going through it and then I said something, one, they used it against me. Two, but I was there. I heard everything, but you didn't do anything to help me move forward. But my thing is, if I see someone hurt or they need something or they're in a bad situation, I'm like, hey, how can I help you move forward? That's the type of person I am, because I've always had to like fix it. You know what I mean? And that led to me picking partners when I was dating, men who are wounded. And I ended up picking a lot of men who needed to be rescued, to be fixed, to be upgraded. And that led me into a lack of myself and of my own desires. And I saw the energy that I give out, I wasn't receiving it. Right?
Yeah.
And so it was a lot of self-awareness of how much I'm doing for other people when I'm not receiving it. Right? Everybody comes to me for advice or cries, and I'm there. Right? I'm that solid, secure, solid foundation for them. They know they can come to me at any time. Right? Because I'll be there. I'm getting emotional, but not having that same, it sucks.
Yeah.
Even if they said I'm here, but not, I can say I'm here. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yes.
And a person who's been through breaching of like trust, been through a lot of abuse, I'm going to do my ugly cry now.
Not even a problem, because it's real and people don't do real.
Yeah. It's hard to have, like even if someone said that, hey, I'm here for you, but they're not physically there and trying to move you forward, you don't know if you can trust them fully.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Do their words match their
Yeah.
actions? And unfortunately, that very often words don't match actions. And some of that is not because they're horrible people. Some of it is because they don't know what to do. Like they don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Some of it is they don't have the window of tolerance
Right.
to see you hurting.
Yeah.
And yet what they don't understand is the promising of I will always be there for you, but not being there for you.
Yeah.
How much damage that can cause.
Yeah. I think in a way, it sucks that I understand why they're coming from a certain perspective in a certain way to me. But I had to understand in a way that, I don't have to understand everything. I don't need to put a meaning behind everything. I try to understand the other person, why they would think the way they are. And I became very observant, like more so now. And I think it's more, of course, it's all trauma response. And I understand that, but I know why they're doing so. If as soon as I feel that, I just move out of their way, and I'm like, and the thing is, I can do it on my own. And I've had people who stuck by me, was my unpaid therapist, my best friend, AKA. And I think he came, and that's the thing, like everybody came to my life at the right timing. And for me to, even if I lost a friend, another good friend came along. If I lost someone, another person who's solid, they came along and they were truthful. And that's the thing for me. If I feel like someone's lying to me, like one little lie or one little thing, I'm done with that person. I can't unsee it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Because of being betrayed so many times and so over the years, right?
Yeah.
So you start picking up on these things, and you're like, but then of course I give grace and I say, hey, and I talk about it and be like, hey, I didn't like that. And if they don't agree with it, or if they act like, that's something that they can move on with, then I just move away from them.
Yeah.
Just because I understand that that's not going to change unless they want to change. So there's so many ways, so many varieties. There's so many scenarios to a thing. So that's, it makes you aware of yourself. I'm so much more aware. My intuition is so much more clear. And
Yeah.
it's all work on yourself. And the amount of love and respect you start having for yourself after you've been through all of that and healed from everything, and you understand yourself, you don't actually go, if anyone acts different, or if anyone acts like you're too much or anything like that, you just move away from that. Right.
Yeah.
And it comes with so much work on yourself. It's just work on yourself. It's not about anyone outside of you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that feels daunting to a lot of people.
Yeah.
To really have to look inward. What are some things kind of for people, for anyone who hasn't yet left, but is doing the Google search or the TikTok search on what is narcissism, or am I in an abusive relationship? If you are Google searching those things, the likelihood that you are in a toxic or unhealthy or abusive relationship is real high. So what's, someone's in that space where they're just like learning. What is maybe one way they can start to find even just a little bit of that insight and power to do the next thing, to do the next step?
Yeah. For me, I think it started from realization, right? And in a way, I kind of put him through a little bit of a test, and it was an observing of the same scenario. So a narcissist will repeat the same thing over and over and again because they're not conscious or self-aware. The funny thing is, when I tested him, I confronted him, he was like, oh, that's not me. That's not me. And then later on in the day, he was like, I don't know how to change. I don't know how to change that behavior. And I'm like, that was for me, I'm like, okay, if you're already telling me that you can't change, that means you will never change. You're in that cycle.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
So it's like observing, and which this is so hard, right? Like all this is easier said than done, but stepping back
yeah,
and observing behavior, almost like you are a scientist and you're observing the patterns. This happens, my partner does this, this is the consequence. This
yeah,
happens, this happens, this happens.
yeah,
And coming at it from a little bit more of an objective place than that emotion place, which is so hard. That's
yeah.
so hard.
It is. It is. I had to not fight with him. Like there was no fighting, but it was more about just being quiet. I just shut down. I just shut down all my emotion. Anything that he was doing, I didn't let that get to me.
Yeah.
I had to emotionally shut down with anything that he was doing and not give it any or
like energy and
energy.
yeah. Yeah. And I don't like this word, but people use the word supply.
Yes.
It's
Yeah,
gross.
I don't like that word
It's a
too.
gross word.
Yeah.
But they want you to react specific ways. And so if you take that away,
Mhm.
they will initially keep trying the same kind of stuff, but they may shift their tactic and try and get a reaction a different way and try and get a reaction. So if you can take that step back and find a way to not give them that,
Yeah. Yeah.
you can see things better.
Yeah. And I stepped away and then I started focusing just on myself. And then every time he would try to trigger me back to that, I would just have a blank face or no reaction or no emotion toward it. And he tried different things. So because he couldn't control me, he tried to do it through my kids, through my cat, through other, like my business and through other things.
Yeah.
But the weirdest thing is when I was watching their action, I think they don't realize that they're doing it. It was so weird because when he would have like that moment of insecurity, because narcissism is a huge insecurity, right? It stems from a lot of insecurity in themselves, right? And narcissists will always go for a person who's strong and they are doing good and they will try to bring them down. So the ways that they attack is your self-worth. Because before I met him, I was a very like bubbly person. I started seeing myself dim down and being just beside him quietly. And he was becoming more. And that's what narcissists do. And I just started to move away from that. And I saw him dimming down. Now when I started to move away, detach myself. So there's so many ways that you can just don't feed into the emotion. Don't feed into what they're trying to do to you and just say it in a way that they're not going to make it bigger than it is.
Yeah.
Because when you say it in a calm way, you will get a reaction from them. Why are you so calm? So, and I started to move away and do my own thing. And that's when he started acting even more. And it was even more aggressive and it was more controlling and more triggering for him because I moved away from that. My first thing, I don't know if I can't remember, Rachel Hollis. It was one of the books that I started reading. And she said when she was in a certain section in her life, she started doing her bed. But the thing is, I started doing bed before I even read that book. I started doing my bed every single morning just to get some kind of consistency in my life and doing my own thing just so I can break away from him, his schedule, his things, and fueling him. So, and I think it was a breakthrough in my mind. And then I started to, of course I left. I had to get to a breaking point in order for me to leave.
Yeah. And I'm thinking with those things, I think that is right. It seems so small.
It does.
I'm going to make my side of the bed every morning, or I'm going to do this one something for me each day, right? Because the chaos that they like to bring into your daily life takes, right? It like, we always talk about in the family court arena, it like muddies the waters.
Yes.
But they do that all the time. So you are not clear on anything. Because when you find that clarity, you're like, nope, I'm being abused. This is what's happening. And so finding those little moments, those small things you can do for you to bring back the power for you. And I'm thinking, what is something after you left, as you were starting to reflect, starting to heal? What are some of those areas that you found that you were gaining your power back in the after? Because while you're there, they're going to be smaller moments of power, because they're not going to let you have larger feelings of power. But after you've left, where have you been able to find your power?
Oh my gosh, it's been a journey.
Yes. Yep.
As you go through so much withdrawal, because it becomes an addiction from the highs and the lows and the highs and the lows. Oh my gosh, I don't know how to even explain that part, because I went through so much anxiety and depression for so long.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because of the withdrawal from the highs and the lows, that it took me, I had to connect to nature, really had to meditate and find, I think meditation helped me in so many ways, because I needed to find that stability in my mind instead of because I was seeking the highs, right?
Yes. Yes.
Because of the withdrawal, it became an addiction, and I can feel it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was trying to seek for highs. But then when I started realizing I'm seeking the highs, I had to just go into meditation and get into nature and get into a solitude in myself. And it was, I kid you not, it was so draining, but so liberating in so many aspects.
Yes.
Going for walks into nature when I've had anxiety. Wow. I didn't think I was going to be emotional, honestly, but it's when you look back, you understand the volume of how much they have a hold on you. And it depends on how long you've been. I've been with them for 3 years and the 20 years. So for my marriage. So all of that combined, it took me a long time.
Yeah. And if people, right, like the healing process is so hard and heavy. And to some extent, and this is not just survivors of abuse, but we're never done, right? We're never done learning, growing, evolving in ourselves. And so I know a lot of you out there, especially if you're really early on in this process, you just want it to be over.
Yeah.
You just want to feel better.
Yeah.
You just want to feel better.
Yeah.
And there will be times when you do feel better. 5 years out, there will be you'll be triggered about something.
Yeah.
And you realize like, wow, there's still areas of growth for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think finding those pieces that do work for you. I am also a huge proponent of being in nature. I struggle to meditate. This brain moves really quickly, so it's harder for me to do. But if you find something that does work for you, give yourself time to use it.
Absolutely.
Make sure that you are worth it enough to use it.
Yeah.
And to spend that 10, 20, minutes to an hour, whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
you are worth it to take the time to do the thing.
Yeah. I think it's more, working on yourself and finding some kind of stability in your routine. My advice would be find a place where you can create a space. Don't find a place. Create a space where you can find solitude in yourself, wherever that looks like. It could be your bedroom that you feel that stability. It could be in nature that you feel stability. It could be anywhere. Just find one place that gives you stability and use that as a way to build yourself. And a lot of people go to the gym, and if you can't work out, and find joy, but not dopamine.
Mm-hmm.
Find little tiny experiences but don't look for the dopamine rush. Find the stability and then work your way to, dancing was my thing. Music was my thing. Listening to Hertz music. Those were my way of bringing things back to, and dopamine in the right ways.
Yeah. I'm so glad you spoke about that because we just recently had an episode around creativity and creative expression as a part of your healing process to get you from that left brain of trying to understand everything to the right brain of which is where we store trauma memories and things. And so it is amazing. Dance, music, art, different forms of movement, nature, all of those things can bring you a different sense of healing, and it will increase your dopamine, but not in that like you were talking about, not in that rush way that addiction and trauma bonding comes in.
Right. And even painting, like watercolor. A lot of people are like, watercolor is so hard to work with. And I'm like, but for me, it was the easiest thing. But that's the thing. Like, you have to find something that brings you peace. Painting was, for me, when I needed a quiet time, I would put like music on in the background. I would paint. And I think one thing that I didn't do, which I am extremely proud of myself with, is look for addiction. So addiction to any bad thing like alcohol or any drugs or anything like that. I didn't seek that. I was into meditation, healing myself in different ways.
Yeah.
And I made a commitment to myself because when I did have that withdrawal, yes, I may have. But I realized how much damage it was doing to me because the emotions were so painful and so high. I had to somehow numb it. And even any breakup, it is painful, right? Because you're withdrawing from that person. You're having anxiety. But once I started to commit and discipline with myself, and I started to redirect myself into painting or meditating or dancing, just putting on music on and dancing was amazing for me. So sometimes I would use painting and dancing at the same time. So, trying to fill myself with good things instead of trying to numb myself with drugs or anything like that. And I think shows I give myself prop, because it takes a lot of willpower in order to do that. And I had to realize how strong I was in order for me to get to that, because I know a lot of people can fall into drugs or alcohol to numb any of that.
Yeah.
And so it takes a lot of willpower. You have to have more willpower than your excuses or any addiction.
Yeah, it is so important to find your things. And so as we wrap up, I guess, what are you doing now? And what do you see in your future?
My future, I see it as very bright. I know my goal is to help women understand and help them move forward, find themselves and find their inner power. And because it took me so long to find mine. And now that I finally found, I know who I am. I don't let anyone outside of me influence me. So for that, and also seeing the beauty in the journey of healing. It will get messy. I'm not going to sugarcoat anything for you. It's not going to get messy. It's going to get hard. It's going to get messy. It's going to be very ugly at times. But once you do go through that process, it is so beautiful, and you start being so confident in yourself. You don't let any outside influence get to you. And to, give any advice to anyone, learn that if you have to question if that person loves you or if they are for you or if you're being abused or anything, you probably are. Your inner self and how you should be treated will let you know.
Yeah. If you can listen in to your intuition, you'll know.
Your gut, feeling, listen to it. I ignored it. Not a good idea. Listen to it. So
Well, I'm so glad that we were able to connect and that you could share your story with my audience. If people wanted to reach out to you, what is the best way to connect with you?
Sure. So my website, it's called Glowing Beyond. Also, they can find me on Instagram. It's Mindset Coach Mita. And TikTok also Mindset Coach Mita. I try to keep up with posting things, but at times life gets busy. But if you can't get a hold of through that, just message me on any of my social media. I will try to answer you as soon as possible.
Yeah, and we will have all of that information in the show notes. And I actually love that it's like full circle of like, hey, I'm on TikTok
Yeah.
and I am supporting people on TikTok because that's where I got my first little inkling of what was going on. So I love that piece. I'm like, yes, go check her out on TikTok. Yeah, so thank you so much, Mita. Thank you all for listening. We do this for you. We do this for you, and we always have you in our minds as we're talking together and as we're thinking of different topics for you. So thank you for listening, and we'll catch you on the next episode of the Rising Beyond podcast.